RK sir, shall I go ahead, RK sir?
Please, sir, please start.
Yeah. Friends, a very happy evening to all of you. I welcome you all to this important CP meeting on the GST, that is the refresher course which we have planned. In fact, interesting topics have been lined up. I was able to see that we have just kind of got broken from the routine and chosen some interesting topics of registration under GST, composition scheme in GST, which both will be covered today, followed by finalization of accounts, which since the March is very nearing, many a time people miss the bus and then later they think that had we planned this way or that way would have been better. So that gets covered tomorrow. And then day 3 is liability to pay in certain cases and the assessment and demand, all covered by very, very eminent faculties, for which we are grateful to our beloved Indirect Tax Committee Chairman, C. Rajendra Kumar P., who is kind of there as a big pillar and support, just not in the matters of indirect tax, but also whenever there are issues relating to institute, department, or probably I will use the word anything under the sun, we just call him and seek his help, guidance, which he always comes forward to help us out. No, sir, I must tell all the good things that have been doing for us, and it's been a great asset for us, so that whenever we have even the smallest doubt that, sir, how should we kind of take things forward, he's there for us. And in the indirect tax committee, is doing an excellent job. I could see that even the certificate courses have been lined up probably week on week. I could see 3 courses getting launched in a span of 1.5 months. So those are the efforts put by the chairman of the Indirect Tax Committee. And also joining with us is C.A. Chinnamastan, who is the chairman of the Indirect Tax Committee of the SARC of ICI. So in fact, both committees are working in tandem with each other. We have initiated a lot of initiatives for the benefit of members and stakeholders, including one of the biggest initiative, the GST help desk. Probably the physical ones will start getting rolled in the next few weeks time actually. So I request Chinnamastan, in fact, before Chinnamastan, our Indirect Tax Committee chairman, to share his thoughts and give the opening remarks. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, DC Jain sir. I can request this screen share or this poster to be removed so that I can see all of you.
Yeah, Virendra sir, you can just switch off the screen.
Stop sharing.
Yeah. At least, yeah, now fine. I can see at least 4 or 5 of you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Very esteemed chairman of the SARC of ICI, my very good friend from Madurai, CA DC Jain. DC is not Dungar Chand Jain. I have renamed him as Digital Chand Jain. From the regional conference that he held, I call him as Digital Chand and not Dungar Chand. The Minister of State, I should say, the SARC of ICI, chairman of the GST Indirect Taxes Committee, Chinnamastan. A very dear friend and a person who adds, I can say, a semblance of knowledge as well as a very well-dressed person, I should say, in the SARC, Chinnamastan. My very dear friend, an intellectual, I must say, CA Virendra Chauhanji from New Delhi. I mean, I must place on record that this particular program is unique. Why? Because topics which generally are not covered in certain programs, in any of the GST related programs are being covered here. For example, we take registration, composition. These may be covered in certain programs. But then finalization of accounts and GST. It is one of the initiatives of the GST and Indirect Taxes Committee this year that we introduced this topic. Finalization of accounts vis-a-vis GST. Now, in the March, and as we are nearing March, accounts finalizations and all those things will happen in corporates and other businesses. As chartered accountants, when we are doing the audit of all these accounts, what are those areas which you need to look into specifically from the GST angle? We have a 3-hour session that is being covered in this particular program. We are also going to discuss liability in certain cases. Now, you will be very surprised as to what is this liability in certain cases. In fact, many times, we need to receive queries from CS that, sir, this particular sole proprietor has expired. Now, what we have to do? What next? Our partner has retired, what next? So a specific session is being there on this particular session, and then we have a session on assessments and demands, etc. We in the GST Indirect Taxes Committee are second to none in ensuring that proper and effective knowledge share happens through the branches to the regional councils of the institute. In fact, I must congratulate the Southern India Regional Council being headed by DC Jain for excellent programs that they have been organizing this year. In spite of COVID, we have had excellent knowledge sharing sessions. And today, one more session is being organized by them, of course, at the initiative of DC Jain. And we are glad that we are hosting it today. All of you are aware of the initiatives taken by our committee. All our materials are there for a free download in the software form, in the soft form, on the website of our committee. And it is also available for sale through CDS portal. We have received tremendous response for all our publications. Now, no longer a chartered accountant can be separate from GST. We need to know GST, whether we do audit, we don't do audit, whether we file annual return, we don't file annual return. We must have a knowledge of GST because it is more important than income tax, because GST is on gross and income tax is on net. So thanking the SIRC for this great opportunity and congratulating them on this wonderful initiative, and thanking my very dear friend, C. Virender Chauhanji, who is going to speak within a few moments from now. I take leave of you. Best wishes to each and every one of you, and best wishes of the festival season. Stay safe and take care of all of your health also. Thank you.
Thank you, RK sir, who has joined us from New Delhi. Actually, he's kind of into institute activities and ensured that, in fact, he promised that somehow he'll make it for the program in the beginning and share his thoughts with us. Thank you so much, sir. Chinna, I will request you to share your thoughts and as well as the introduction of the speaker unit, please do. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, RK sir. Respected Chairman of SIRC, of ICA DC Jain sir, and our Central Council members, and Chairman of GST and Indirect Tax Committee of ICA, C. Rajendra Kumar sir, and today's speakers, Virender Chauhan sir, and the CA Shubham Ketan, and my dear members who joined this virtual webinar. Very good evening to everyone. Members, since several years, I remember from the service tax days, whenever the word indirect tax, especially from the south, comes, let it be a service tax or the GST or the any indirect tax, one name, that is the name every member's mind in the professional fraternity is none other than our Rajendra Kumar sir. And one can really understand this name he earned not overnight. One can appreciate these efforts. Initially, he was made as a chairman of GST and indirect tax committees. I can confidently say the Rajendra Kumar sir has brought more value to this position, which is chairing now as the indirect tax committee chairman. I don't remember a day when he said no to any of our needs. Whenever we reach out to him, any reason, he always having a solution for this. I'm really happy to be associated with this chairman as a indirect tax and GST committee. I really appreciate if our publications, if the required segment-wise revenue, the GST revenue from the member side is the more than 70%. That is the contribution by the Rajiv Kumar sir. I really hats up to Rajiv Kumar sir. Members, coming to the topics, considering the changes that are being brought in the GST law, every position right from the registration has become new every day. It is always advisable for the members to get updated on these aspects through this kind of seminars. I believe the package definitely will enrich our members with this experience. Members, I want to share that beyond these GST topics, whenever I participate in the program as a council, regional council members. Recently, you know that branch bank auditors list hosted the draft list in the website. The most of the firms and members got the common information. That is, the one information is need to update the complete income tax returns of the members. The second one is your category is subject to verification of the financial documents. This message is the common, but whoever the members it's a need to submit the complete income tax return, they need to download the PDF copy of the complete income tax return. They again need to submit this one, because the members are always the feeling that why this all the information required by the institute. Members, I need to give the clarity on this. The institute itself is not asking this information. It is the requested by the RBI. You know that once that income tax scrutiny is closed at the income tax authorities, then AG audit will going on. Like that, the once the list is finalized, the RBI will audit that all the firms the on test basis or random basis at the institute level. Institute is the custodian, is in a position to provide all the information to the RBI, so that with the direction of the RBI, it's the institute is requesting all this information. So not for that any other reason. And the one more clarification I want to give is that the recent, in the last 10 days back, the RBI has withdrawn the cooling place concepts. This impacts is goes that there earlier there was a 34 places in India. In south is the 5 places. Now that these places also is away from the cooling places, wherever you have the address branch head office address, will get continuous bank audit. But after with this impact, even after 4 years also, you may chance to appoint another banks. Earlier, if you have the head office address in the polling places, there is no chance. But now we get that opportunity. We can see that it's a COVID relief to the chartered accountants who are practicing, especially in the small, medium size practitioners. So with this, and the another job as given by the chairman sir, it's a great privilege to me to introduce the speaker CA Viren Sohan sir profile. Viren Sohan sir is a chartered accountant and law graduate, senior partner in Messrs. ABC and Co. Chartered Accountant, New Delhi since 1987 and practicing in indirect tax, and special invitee to the Indirect Tax Committee of ICI for several years. He delivered lectures and written articles both at national and international level. He authored books on Delhi VAT, Guide to VAT, 7 editions, and compendium on circulars and notification, the Delhi VAT Act and rules. He authored books on GST guidance to GST 5 edition, GST Ready Reckoner 4 editions, and GST Manual 2 editions, and GST Bill Digest, GST Made Simple, and Guide to GST for real estate sectors. This is the latest one. Sir, Sohan sir, so once again, it's welcome. The next 1.5 hours, the virtual dais, yours, sir. Please, sir.
Yeah, I'm extremely delighted with your kind words. Mr. DC Jain, Chairman of SIRC, Mr. China, Mr. RK. There is a lot of going on in my head to say about the chairman, but with the paucity of time, I'll just make one statement about the chairman of Indirect Tax Committee, that he has performed so tremendously during this year. Probably in all the times to come, all the forthcoming chairmen would be finding it very difficult to achieve such a benchmark. And from the core of my heart, I pray to the God that he is not a person, he is himself an institution. Therefore, he deserves very soon at the helm of the institution. I hope you understand what I intend to say. So he is totally a man who is admired across all the regions, across the country. And we pray Almighty that he may give him more strength in all the times to come, and good health and long life. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your company, sir. Now, since the topic is a little large and time is already 20 minutes have gone, and I have to restrict my talk.
Sir, what I suggest, Virendra Chauhanji, is that there are certain recent changes which have come up in registration. Those things you can focus upon, because that is something very important for our members.
Yeah,
The
sir.
focus can be on that.
Mainly I am focusing on that.
Yes.
But I would like to take to a journey of little more registration processes, where I find across the seminars that our members are finding sometimes it contentious or difficult to understand certain peculiarities about the drafting of the law, and lot of notification after notifications are coming. So a lot of clarities are not there, and this registration basically sometimes is considered to be not a very important topic, but this is a foundation stone of the entire process of business. And many large organizations are even finding it difficult to know whether they should go for multiple registration, whether they should go for ISD, whether they should go for cross charge, or whether at all they require registration, like when they are importing goods from a port and the goods are directly sold from then and there, either in the same state or in some other state, whether they require registration into that local state from where the goods are being imported at the port, because the state authorities normally compels them that they should seek registration. What is the position of judicial authorities into this direction? And many more such issues. I'll take the members in the first 30 minutes to the entire journey of such contentious issues. And thereafter, certainly, I'm there to make a mention of all the recent changes as far as enlargement of the scope of cancellation of registration, suspension of registration, and Aadhaar authentication provisions, etc. Those all I would be going through. At the outset, I begin with that what are the places where we require registration. Let me give every of my discussion through an example. And I wish that all the members participating here, either through QA or through chat mode, they may come forward to throw their questions or their opinions. Suppose I am a chartered accountant practicing in Delhi, and my turnover in Delhi is say about 20 lakhs, and I'm registered here. At the same time, I have a farmhouse, say in some other state like in Haryana, where I have my agriculture produce, which is exempt from tax, and my turnover of that agriculture produce is 1 crore rupees. Whether I require registration in that particular state also? The answer is straight away no. Because normally we are being misled by the provisions of law, because we normally do not read the law word by word. If I read section 22, it starts with, I need to seek registration in that particular state from where I'm making taxable sale. So since agriculture produce is not taxable, so I am not at all required to go for registration into the other state. This is first issue. Second issue, in the meantime, let me share my PPT also. Yeah. I think PPT is visible.
Yes, sir, visible, sir.
Yeah.
Virendraji, visible, sir, yes.
Yeah. Then I move to the next item, where I would like to say that the threshold limit is 20 lakhs in general, 40 lakhs for only those taxpayers who are engaged purely, exclusively in providing supply of goods only. Earlier, this provision was contained under section 23 through an exemption provision, but that exemption was conditional. There used to be several conditions being contained under section 23, like that person may not be dealing in the supply of ice cream, pan masala, tobacco, and he has not taken voluntary registration, and they are engaged in making interstate supplies in the state of Arunachal Pradesh, etc., which are the special state, etc. But there was a dilemma into that particular exemption under section 23. It was that he should not have been dealing in supply of any services. So there was not exclusion of interest on FDR, etc., whether are being excluded from the threshold limit of 40 lakhs rupees. Although there were two schools of thoughts on that issue, but fearing tomorrow that whether one should go for 20 lakhs or 40 lakhs, we usually recommended the taxpayers to go for registration at 20 lakhs only, because of this controversy of supply of services in the form of interest on FDR, etc. In fact, that particular amendment was considered to be redundant. Thereafter, the government thought of coming a clarity on that particular issue, and they at the same time introduced amendment under section 22 and categorically given a proviso there excluding the interest on FDR, but at the same time they gave power to the special category states or the UTs like Delhi or J&K, etc., that they should seek permission or proper recommendation from the GST Council if they want to increase the threshold limit. Means thereby now there is a clarity that the 40 lakhs limit for exclusively suppliers of goods is available. 20 lakhs is available for all the other states, and there are only 4 special category states which are left are only Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, and Tripura. They need to seek the special permission of the GST Council before they want to raise their limit up to 20 lakhs. In effect, across India, now the limit can be 20 lakhs and 40 lakhs, and that's it. So the limit of 10 lakhs is indirectly, I want to give a hint, is no more across the country. Then there is a conflict. What are the contents of aggregate turnover? We all know that aggregate turnover comprises local supplies, central supplies, exports, exempted supply, but there are certain apprehensions whether non-taxable supplies like petroleum products, etc. Yes, sir.
Viren Sohan sir, members are complaining that the videos slide slows is not rotating. So
in fact, I am
PPT
making,
sir, not visible because are you providing the PPT, sir?
I am providing PPT, but before that, I am just taking to the root of
That's it. That's it.
Okay. certain content issues, and thereafter I would enter into the PPT mode where I have taken the latest amendments and controversies there.
Okay. Okay.
Because the subject is very large.
Right. Right.
So very hurriedly, I would be completing within first 30 minutes these content issues, and then we will be entering into the journey of the PPT.
Okay. Members got a clarity, sir. Right. Thank you. Please continue, sir.
So as far as aggregate turnover is concerned, these petroleum products, alcoholic liquor sale, etc., are also part of the aggregate turnover. But scheduled 3 items like salary, they are not part of aggregate turnover, like sale of property after completion, they are not part of aggregate turnover. And the interest on FDR is also part of aggregate turnover being exempt supply. This is a great dilemma, whether interest on FDR is also to be considered. So I would be citing certain examples on these issues. Let us create certain, I have created certain case studies. First issue, that there is a person whose turnover is say 15 lakhs rupees. He is supplying goods and he is not required to go for registration. But at the same time, he is liable to pay RCM, say on GTA services or some advocate service or for some other reason, sponsorship service, this service, that service, for whatever reason, because RCM list is quite large. Once he is liable for registration under RCM, the question arises whether on that 15 lakhs turnover of goods which were earlier exempt are also taxable. Answer is straight away yes. Once he is subject to registration compulsorily, entire turnover which is taxable is liable for entire taxation. If any member wants to dissent or raise a question, they may come forward immediately. Another issue, an advocate is having professional income of 16 lakhs rupees and interest on FD is also 10 lakhs rupees. In effect, his total turnover becomes 16 lakhs rupees. Now this FD interest is also forming part of the aggregate turnover as I just recently mentioned. So in effect, his turnover becomes 26 lakhs. Whether he is liable for registration? Answer is no, because notification number 5/2017 gave a exemption that any person whose entire outward supply is subject to RCM, he is not required registration. So many of my advocate brothers also ask such questions, which is answered like this. Chinaji, if you find any question in the meantime in QA,
Sure, sir.
you may please mention so that the members may get clarity at the same time.
So members having doubt only these PPTs only, sir. But we are.
PPT, I will move a little later.
That's clear. That's clear, sir. Okay.
A person is having interest income. A person is having rental income. And in total, it goes about 20 lakhs. Like commercial property rental is 6 lakhs rupees. And interest income from FDR is 22 lakhs rupees. He is a salaried person. Whether he should go for registration? Answer is yes. Because interest income plus commercial property rental income 6 lakh rupees becomes more than 20 lakhs rupees. And salary income is not to be clubbed into the aggregate turnover. Therefore, he is liable for registration. No doubt that he is liable to pay tax only on rupees 6 lakhs earnings from rental income. There is a trust, a religious trust. He got income of rupees 15 lakhs rupees as offerings, donations, etc. But at the same time, it is having 5 lakhs as rental income and 2 lakhs as interest on FDR. So whether this trust requires registration? Once again, this is very important question. There is a trust, religious trust. It is having income from offerings and donations, etc., to the tune of 15 lakhs rupees. It is having 5 lakhs as rental income from commercial property. And it is having 2 lakhs rupees as exempted income from FDR. So there are 3 incomes. In this particular situation, although the total has gone above 20 lakhs, but this trust is not required registration due to the reason that the 15 lakhs rupees which it received through offerings or donations is not a supply. It is outside the purview of supply. The reason are numerous, obvious, that it is not covered neither as a supply of goods or supply of services, one thing. Another thing, the principle of quid pro quo is not applicable in this case. So these are unanimous or free flow of funds from people to the trust. Therefore, it is not a supply. Another issue, the dealer has only export turnover of 20 lakhs rupees of goods, and at the same time having 5 lakhs rupees as interest from FDR. In effect, the total turnover has become 25 lakhs rupees. Whether it requires registration, answer is yes. Since the exports are considered as interstate supply and there is no threshold limit for that, therefore this person is requiring registration. But had he been supplying services interstate, in that case there is a exemption through a notification up to 20 lakhs rupees. In that situation, the situation could have changed, provided the total turnover would not have crossed 20 lakhs rupees. So concluding on services, if the person is having less than 20 lakhs aggregate turnover and is supplying interstate supplies of services, then registration is not required. One more case study I have prepared, that a person is having godowns across the country, but manufacturing unit in one state only. Say in the state of Maharashtra, he is having his manufacturing, but godowns he is maintaining across the country, and he is receiving orders in Maharashtra, but he is invoicing from the godowns. Obviously, in that case, wherever from he is making taxable supplies through tax invoices, he requires registration. But in case if from a godown he is not making any supply, then registration is not required. Another question, whether supply of shares, sale of shares, both in situation, whether the shares are held as an investment or shares are being traded as a business, in both the situation, the turnover of shares will not be added for the purpose of aggregate turnover calculated for the purpose of registration. Since the securities are neither goods nor services, some of the members are actually confused with the introduction of section 17.2, 17.3, etc., wherein partial reversals are made on account of sale of securities, but those sections are meant for the reversal of ITC. As far as registration process is concerned, there the turnover of any kind of securities would be excluded. I have prepared one case study that suppose there is a turnover of rupees less than 20 lakhs. One turnover of 11 lakhs rupees is in the state of Tripura, and another sale of say 7 lakhs in the state of Goa. Then in both the states registration is required, because in Tripura the limit is 10 lakhs rupees. So once a person is requiring registration in one special state, in another state, even if the turnover is less than 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs, still registration is required. Now we will enter into an area of persons who are exempt from registration. That is contained in section 23. Here there are no much issues, but still I would be touching few areas where this exemption provisions may create certain confusions. some people are making routine mistakes that they are engaged in charitable activities. And in these charitable activities, there are two kinds of supply I will just mention. One is free supplies, and another is supply without consideration. Now, these two terms looks very synonymous. I would once again say free supplies and supplies without consideration. Whether these two are synonymous and are equally exempt because they are outside the purview of Section 7, they are not supply. But there is a large difference between these two terms practically. Let me cite two examples. Suppose there is a pharmaceutical company and it is giving free samples to its dealers, distributors, doctors, etc. This is a supply which would be considered as supply without consideration. But if this pharma company puts this medicines into Kumbh Ka Mela and asks the general public to pick up the medicines of their choice, of their requirement, then those supply of medicines would be considered as free supplies. So to the extent any supply is made free, to that extent it is not part of supply and hence not taxable. But if the supply are made without consideration, they are taxable. Since in that particular situation, Rule 27 will come in picture. Rule 27, which is a valuation rule that states that supplies made otherwise than monetary terms. So in that particular situation, the valuation rules will come in picture since most of the supplies which are made without consideration, they are made to the related parties like dealers, sole selling agents, distributors, doctors. And law tomorrow may embrace within itself whether a particular person to whom you are making supply without consideration is related party or not. So most of the charitable organizations are asking such questions. They claim that they are making their supplies without consideration. But whenever they are being caught that they are making their supplies to related parties, in that situations, they come within the bracket of the taxation. Now I come to the compulsory registration of casual taxable person, because this is also a issue which normally people sometimes are not able to understand. Like an event management company based in Bangalore is conducting an event in Goa. Since the event management company is occasionally undertaking supply of event management service in Goa, and since it does not have any fixed place of business, it will have to obtain casual taxable person registration in Goa. Another example could be an outdoor catering service supplier based in Pune undertakes to provide catering service at the above event in Goa, same event. The catering service provider shall also have to obtain registration in Goa as casual taxable person. Same way, a medical association is conducting a conference during COVID in Delhi for 2 days to analyze the impact of the pandemic and charging participation fee from the members. It would be liable for casual registration. there is an exception to this rule that a supplier who is supplying the jewelry and taking the jewelry either within the state or outside the state for sale on approval basis or for demonstration purposes at a house, etc., then that he would be precluded from the purview of casual taxable person. This exemption is given through a circular. Then any person who is subject to RCM, who is covered under RCM, is liable for mandatory registration. If any member is having any issue on this particular topic, they may come forward. Then the next compulsory registration is 9(5). That is electronic commerce operators through whom certain services are being provided of, say, hotels or radio taxi, motor cab, or housekeeping, plumbing, carpentering, etc. They are subject to compulsory registration. Non-resident taxable persons are subject to compulsory registration. Then TCS and TDS deductor are for compulsory registration. Then the agent is subject to compulsory registration. Now this agent term, although has been clarified over and again twice by the department through circular number 57, 4th September 2018, and then it was further clarified based on the same circular on 5th 11, 2018. I'll give only two examples which agent is covered subject to compulsory RCM and which agent is not covered. Suppose Mr. A principal, asks Mr. B to make purchases and sale on his behalf. And he procures, the agent procures purchase and sale orders. It can be either way, purchase or sale, both, one or two, whatever kind of transactions agent can be interested, he will do that job. So when the agent is procuring a customer and that customer is directly billed by the principal and the agent is only entitled for his commission, in that particular situation, that agent is independent of enjoying threshold limit of 20 lakhs rupees as commission income, and he is not requiring a separate registration. But if that agent is billing on behalf of the principal, any kind of purchase or sales, only in that situation that becomes a person who is mandatorily covered under section 24. There is a very good clarification giving certain scenarios 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. in the circular. Then there is another category is input service distributor. Then there is another category is electronic commerce operator. Then there is another category is OIDAR. These are the persons who mandatorily require registration. Now, as far as procedure of registration is concerned, we would be talking that procedure only when we will talk about the latest amendments. Way back with effect from 1st April 2020, the government introduced Aadhaar authentication while granting registration. So we would be talking about this issue while making discussion on updates. After having understood the registration, aggregate turnover, exemption, compulsory registration, procedure of registration, I'm skipping, it's a large subject. I'm coming straight away on amendment. As far as amendments are concerned, the amendment provisions can be categorized into three parts. First is core fields. Core fields are those fields into our RC which requires proper officer authorization before those can be amended. Like, I want to change my place of business within the state. I want to open some additional place of business. I may be having my head office, branch office, factory, godown, laboratory, record keeping stores, training center, whatever kind of establishment I possess, either within the state or outside the state, that becomes my additional place of business, and that is requiring certain documents to be furnished in support of owning that particular premises, either on ownership or rent, and then PO will give his authorization. Then there can be core field, like I want to change the name of trade name, etc. of my business, then addition or deletion or retirement of partners, directors, etc. or my authorized signatory, etc. Those are authorized signatories in the non-core field. Then the second category is non-core fields. Non-core field can be mobile number, mail ID, authorized signatory, and either adding or deleting, all those will go in a non-core field. Then the third category is the fields which cannot be changed at all, neither with the permission of the PO nor yourself. Like change of permanent account number cannot take place. Change of state cannot take place. Constitution of business cannot take place. Like in case of amalgamation, merger, change from one proprietor to another, death of the proprietor, all such kinds of issues are being taken through new registration only. You would be learning all these issues in chapter 16, which would be taken in your this sessions. Liability to pay in certain cases, you would be taking care of all sorts of the transfer of business, etc. Now, straight away, since the issues are not less as far as cancellation of registration are concerned, there are numerous issues, but better, since I may be having time up to 6:30, better we should come now on to the amendments, latest amendments, which are creating some hue and cry amongst the members also, amongst businesses also. So straight away coming to the amendments and latest updates. Section 29 enables a taxpayer for cancellation of registration. Earlier, there was an embargo for cancellation of registration by voluntary registrant. The amendment made to Finance Act 2020 has been notified with effect from 1st January 21, enabling a voluntary registrant to apply for cancellation. In fact, the government, whenever makes any amendment, I have observed that they make that law or they make the amendment also for their own benefit. Suppose there is a person who has taken voluntary registration and is engaged in any kind of malpractices. So there used to be certain situations that without having crossed the limit of 20 lakhs rupees and without having shown any prehistory of the businesses, they used to take a registration and overnight they did business of crores of rupees and ran away. I would be sharing few examples when we would be moving a little forward, how such things are basically happening and the government is coming for these amendments. Section 30 enables a registered person to apply for revocation of registration within 30 days from the date of service of cancellation of order. We all know that this 30 days time was too less because sometimes the mail is going into spam. Sometimes we are unable to respond within 30 days. Sometimes we are not able to see the portal or this information that there is a cancellation notice is being lifted onto the portal. So this 30 days time usually used to lapse. And once revocation option is not available, then the only option used to be filing an appeal. But filing of appeal was a simple thing if I assume, but the disposal of appeal was very difficult because most of the occasion appellate authorities were not available or they were not functioning in most of the states. So there was a large pendency of appeals before the authorities, and keeping in view the paucity of their own machinery and finding their appellate procedures to be redundant almost, the government thought of making this 30 days time to 90 days. So the amendment was brought in Finance Act 2020, which has been finally notified with effect from 1st January 21, enabling additional commissioner or joint commissioner to grant a further extension of 30 days. And the commissioner is further empowered to grant another 30 days extension. In effect, the PO got 30 days time to revoke the cancellation. Then additional commissioner and JC got another 30 days and the commissioner 30 days. But since the department is same, so this 90 days time is now considered as adequate for restoration of a cancellation of registration. Then changes in registration procedure, latest updates. Notification number 94/2020 made certain amendments into the rules relating to registration and registration cancellation procedure, etc. And this, since the release of this notification, there are series of seminars and series of questions from the field, specifically from those dealers who are usually filing their returns late, they are return defaulters for one or the other reason. And this pandemic season has almost witnessed that many of the taxpayers could not comply with their compliances in time. Maybe due to paucity of funds, maybe due to paucity of their accounting staff. And this has practically happened that most of the finance departments have just scattered, and many of the employees have been either retrenched or they have gone to their native places. And we have been finding it quite difficult in the state of Delhi that many of the people normally belongs to the other states. They migrated to their own places, and either on Zoom or through some other media they wanted to work. They were quite frightened to join in the state of Delhi. Like only two cities, one is Mumbai and another is Delhi, was at the hot list. So in most of the large and small organizations, we find the staff crunch, and entire system was just shaken, and the government has brought in certain drastic changes into the provisions. But if I give my opinion about whether this is the prime reason which I'm talking about, whether there is some secondary reason also before these amendments have been brought in. So I would be talking to them also, because secondary reason is more important as compared to this pandemic time. So what is the increase in time with respect to granting of GST registration? Where a person applies for GST registration, the PO shall have 7 days time to either grant the registration in form GST REG 06 or issue a deficiency notice in form GST REG 03. Earlier, this time limit was 3 days. This is a very simple provision which was warranted that this 3 days time limit is too less. Then biometric authentication for grant of registration certificate. We very well know that the authentication done until now was through NN18, dated 23/3/20, with effect from 1st April 2020. This authentication process was started since that time while applying for GST registration was based on Aadhaar number authentication. Now, this Aadhaar number authentication was having certain exceptions, like it will not apply on partners, it will not apply on directors, and many other exceptions were there. And the only purpose was limited to the authorized signatory would be enough if he provides the Aadhaar authentication number. But normally in so-called bogus dealers, this Aadhaar authentication was of a person who was of no means. However, now, what is the amendment? The individual Karta, managing director, whole-time director, partner, members of managing committee of association board of trustees, authorized representative or authorized signatory will have to get biometric based Aadhaar identification authentication and photograph submitted. Looks something very dangerous, looks something very lengthy, looks something very impractical, and seems there may be at occasion more than 20 partners. At occasion there may be 7 or 12 directors. So it seems quite cumbersome, but in fact it is not so. If we go through the frequently asked questions released by CBIC, things are not so difficult. We will be talking about them right away. Now, to continue this biometric authentication, in case a person wishes not to opt for Aadhaar authentication. So suppose somebody says, I don't have Aadhaar. Then biometric information with photograph and other KYC documents are to be submitted. Now, what is this KYC documents? And what are the options of KYC documents? So once again, we have to rely on the FAQ released by the government, and we would be talking about them very quickly. Only upon verification of such documents, the registration would be granted. So do we understand that there are 2 ways now to update our current or existing registrations and to seek the new registration either through Aadhaar authentication or through KYC? Straight away the answer is yes, but the government is persuading that Aadhaar identification should be adopted by the taxpayer as far as possible. Now, these activities would have to be physically carried out at one of the facilitation centers as notified by the commissioner. Now, you see, even if I'm submitting all the documents in KYC, the authenticity of those documents would be cross-verified physically through originals for which the effective date is yet to be notified. Now, if no physical verification was carried out, in such a case, if registration is not granted within 7 days of receipt of application, which is complete in all aspects, or within 7 days of receipt of clarification to form GST REG 03. REG 03 is a questionnaire or any further document required by the department and inform GST RE04, which is our reply to that particular notice, the application for registration shall be deemed to have been approved. So once again, things look simple, that within 7 days, we would be able to seek the registration, which is normally not happening. That is a practical difficulty we have been facing, that in most of the cases we are seeking REG03, and the authorities, without giving cognizance to the document and making further verification or further communication on that particular aspect, like the document is not legible or you have not applied in a correct circle, whatever kinds of objections they make, and our REG04 is treated as redundant, and the registrations are being cancelled, rejected. Registration is rejected. So once registration is rejected, the only remedy left with us is to go for appeal. It is not as good as cancellation of registration, for which revocation provisions are contained under section 30. So here the only remedy available is appellate procedure. Then deemed approval, where physical verification was carried out. In such a case, if registration is not granted or a deficiency memo is not issued within 30 days of receipt of application, the application for registration shall be deemed to have been approved. Once again, it looks like a dream has come true, that a physical verification is being conducted at the premises of the registrant, new registrant, and within 30 days, there is no question from the other side, and the registration is being granted or deemed to have been granted. The deeming fiction only completes when we receive REG06. In earlier time also, when the time was 3 days, and if within 3 days we are not getting REG06, that the deeming fiction used to be fictitious or redundant in law. The same is likely to happen now onwards, but I would be coming up very soon the intention of the government behind enacting all such amendments. You must be guessing that the so-called spread of claim of bogus ITC through bogus billings and converting of B2C transaction into B2B, and then claiming refund by the exporters is a big reason, which I talked in the beginning to be the secondary reason, but mainly that is a primary reason for going such a hectic registration, and while assuming powers for cancellation of registration even without giving notice, or even on finding certain variances between 3B and GSTR1. So those are going into the direction of plugging such kinds of malpractices. Now, cancellation of registration certificate. I would be throwing a little highlight on what kind of physical verification would be carried, what is the purpose of physical verification, what kind of documents the officer in the course of physical verification. All those things will also come. Where the proper officer has reasons to believe, this is cancellation of registration. Where the proper officer has reasons to believe that the registration of a person is liable to be cancelled, he may, without affording the said person a reasonable opportunity of being heard, suspend the registration of such person with effect from a date to be determined by him. You see, there is, once we know the intention behind the law, sometimes we find a good reasoning while enacting such a provision that even the person is not being given a principle which is enunciated by the Supreme Court, that is the principle of natural justice. Nobody can be condemned without being heard. But if the situation warrant, the government always seek power in certain cases. Here I would like to highlight one practical case which happened in Delhi. There was a person who was a Cadbury chocolate dealer, wholesale dealer. And he used to sell to small shopkeepers, some retail, these medical shops or some other perfume kirana shops, etc., as B2C transactions. And he used to pay huge tax to the government. After setting off the inputs, the item is taxable at the rate of 18%. Earlier, it used to be 28%. Now, a dummy exporter came to him that whatever you bill B2C, because B2C people do not maintain books of accounts, either they are in composition or many, they do not maintain any books of accounts. And you give to them bill of supply, it is better you give me B2B, then I'll refund you 9%. So he dealt with him that if you give me 1 crore of B2B bills, I'll pay you 9%, that is 9 lakhs rupees over and above on this only merely billing work. The Cadbury's dealer did that. And the other person who received the bill as B2B, being a bogus exporter, exported dummy chocolates to the country Sri Lanka to his brother. In fact, in the wrappers, there was a home, but he sold that chocolate at the rate of say 100 rupees. And he pretended to be a very, very big chocolate exporter, having received all the bogus billings from the inward side and claimed several hundred crores refund from the government. Now, when the government, through some mechanism, through its artificial intelligence, etc., came to know about this fact, they immediately blocked this distributor of Cadbury chocolate and that exporter, and their everything was frozen, including bank accounts, their RC, their electronic credit ledger, etc. Everything was blocked. But if that person, either the supplier or the recipient, goes in a writ, whether the law permit them to freeze all the electronic credit ledger or the bank accounts, etc., which are without having gone through the process of law or creating a demand, issuance of SCN under section 73 or 74, completing the assessment proceedings, creating a demand, and giving them the opportunity of being gone into the appeal, etc. So whether the lawmakers can have authority to throw away the book of GST law and put an embargo into the business of the supplier and the purchaser of chocolate? Court said no. And all the accounts were defrozen. And they were asked to resume their business. So there was a hue and cry into the government department that what is all this happening? We wanted to arrest this person, but the law is not permitting. Then 132 section was amended. Section 122 was amended, and rest of the provisions as far as cancellation of registration and process of authentication of registration, etc., were brought in. And that is the main reason of invoking such provisions. Then increase in reasons of cancellation of registration. Apart from the existing reasons, the government has allowed cancellation of registration in the following cases. A, if a registered person avails input tax credit in violation of the provisions of Section 16 of the Act or rules made thereunder, the hint is directly towards Rule 36(4). Form GSTR 2B. So whatever credits are there in GSTR 2B, as on a particular date of say 11th or 14th of a particular month, if you are claiming more than that, then your registration can be cancelled. Very, very serious assumption of powers by the government officers. B, if a registered person furnishes details of outward supplies in Form GSTR 1 for one or the more periods in excess of the outward supplies declared in GSTR 3B, this can very well happen because in GSTR 1, we sometimes show different turnover, and in GSTR 3B, we at occasion make certain adjustments also. So those kinds of mismatches between GSTR 1 and 3B may now encourage taxpayers to go for cancellation of registration. Then C, if a registered person violates provisions of newly inserted Rule 86B, this rule talks about 1% tax to be paid in cash. Although this rule is very liberal, but we frighten sometimes the computer may not mislead the department, because the computer will understand only garbage in, garbage out. And at such a large juncture of more than a crore registration, probably these provisions already have dampened the sentiments, may dampen the sentiments in the times to come. Although I'm sure the GSTN and CBIC will leave no stone unturned, keeping the honest taxpayers out of these brackets, A, B, and C. Then registration of a taxpayer can be suspended in the following cases. Now, earlier there was a cancellation, enhancement A, B, and C. Now the department is talking of suspension, where there is a significant difference outward supplies in GSTR 1 and 3B. At occasion, some bogus dealers only files GSTR 1 so that the other person can get the credit, and they abandon filing GSTR 3B. And even if they file, they pay a meager tax, maybe less than 1% in their GSTR 3B. So such people's registration would be suspended immediately, even in a day, without giving an opportunity of being heard. Then after suspension, where there is a significant difference or anomaly between GSTR 2A and 3B, this is another region. One region was GSTR 1 and 3B, now another region is 2A and 3B. This significant difference in 2 and 3B normally exists, normally. In the case of most of the large taxpayers, I can say if a taxpayer's turnover is more than 50 crores rupees, such differences are in lakhs. And they are continuing over a period of time because of the small taxpayers do not discharge their compliances in time, or they are quarterly, etc. So this particular clause, if tomorrow a computer misunderstood, may create a lot of hue and cry if their RCs are being suspended. Probably they may not move their goods in the absence of raising the e-way bills, etc. That's the reason there are a lot of seminars on this particular aspect. Now, this should result in any contraventions of the provisions of the Act or the rules thereunder. Further, to such suspension, an intimation shall be sent to the taxpayer in his email ID, requiring him to explain within 30 days as to why his registration should not be cancelled. First, his RC would be suspended. Then he would be given an email. That email may go into the spam, and even the person may not come to know that he has been given an email or a notice. For that, he has to visit the portal or keep on watching the spam. But this provision suddenly looks to be absurd, that without giving a notice, and the schema of sending notices in most of the judicial authorities are being considered okay, even if it is given on portal or even if it is sent via email. So what would be the fate of the unorganized sector? That is to be seen. And what would be the fate of that unorganized sector, which is dependent on some small professionals who themselves do not see most of the mails, and even many of the taxpayers do not know which mail ID has been given into their registration certificate. Then suspension of registration in special cases. Restriction in case of suspension of GST registration. A registered person whose registration has been cancelled can neither make any taxable supplies nor shall be granted any refund. So today, a person may get a notice that his registration is suspended. And this suspension, the reason before the officer is suspicion. Now, can this happen even in a case where the reasons of suspicion are not tenable? Whether it can work on a small tax evasion petition, whether it can happen on a small complaint, whether it can happen if an officer wants to go against a particular taxpayer. Because suspicion word is not recognized in law. If we talk of section 148 under Income Tax Act, if you read section 132 under section under the Income Tax Act, if we read section 67 under the GST law, at most of the occasion it is written that before invoking any adverse inference against a person, the officer should be of the opinion based on material. You see, till date, no law could advent such procedures. It was because of the reason that such naked powers can be abused. In the large system of democracy, political oppositions, many kinds of rivalries, many kinds of vested interests, such kind of things may happen. So in my opinion, the government must revisit that they should not assume such powers. Removal of suspension before completion of proceedings. I can recall a day when the DTC was likely to be introduced in Parliament, Direct Tax Code, where the service provisions, service of notice provisions were deeming provisions. Deeming in the sense that if the notice is being sent on the correct address, it would be deemed to have been served. If the notice is being sent through email, it would be deemed to have been served. And those particular provisions were opposed across the country, across the judicial authorities. And because of certain such harsh provisions, the DTC could not see the light of the day in the Parliament. Same kinds of things have started happening into GST. Removal of suspension before completion of proceeding. Now the proper officer shall now have the option to revoke the suspension of registration anytime during the pendency of the proceeding for cancellation. Now this suspension is done, the taxpayer is given a notice why your RC should not be cancelled. Now the taxpayer has to reply, and it may take a couple of days, a couple of weeks. During that time, his business may be halted. T&D Electrical CR Karnataka, it is just some, say, advertisement has come in between our discussion. Works contractor having a presence in multiple states, AAR held that it is taxpayer's choice if he wants to seek separate registration of having a project in different states. Many of our members might be having such question that in case of a builder or real estate developer or a works contractor may be having presence in various states, whether they require registration in different states, and different state authorities compels them before giving certain clearances that you should be registered in our state, but the law, and my opinion, and this AAR says that you are not supposed to take registration in a state where from you are not making any taxable supplies. So a person sitting in Maharashtra can conduct works contract services across India through one registration only. Normally, if I deal with a client, I see the facts and the circumstances of each case and then decide what is in the interest of the taxpayer and then advise accordingly. And normally I reach at an inference that in case of large taxpayers, we normally recommend to seek registration across India in every state wherever they have large projects, because in that way they would be able to get better tax credits of their local procurements. Then sequential filing of returns and statements may be made mandatory. This I'm telling with my experience while interacting with the authorities, while being a member of the indirect tax committee, or while at occasion I come across that we mutually discuss with authorities either before release of some notification or while those authorities are seeking our recommendations how to go ahead in such some directions. This deadline of 1st April 2020 may be a little tinkered, but in the times to come, it is almost sure that there would be sequential filing of returns and statements. What does it mean? Sequential filing of returns means that when I'm filing my return, like say 3B, I can claim only on those credits which are reflecting in my GSTR 2B on 11th or 12th of that particular month. No more credit like 26 AS in Income Tax Act. The government has already brought down 36(4) at 5% plus only, and this 5% is likely to be trimmed very soon. And as far as statements, means outward sales supplies. So based on those data which are being uplifted by the supplier into the computer, that would be my purchases based on which I would be able to seek credits. In the meantime, artificial intelligence will also look into whether a particular HSN is creditable or not. Suppose I bought a car and I want to claim credit of this, claiming that this car would be used for transporting passengers, transporting goods into my company. HSN will deny the credit. So many more parameters are being taken care by the department to monitor such kinds of credits while giving me data into my GSTR. 2B, 2A and 2B. Today is in conflict. One is flexible, another is fixed, and nobody knows that which one is a better way to claim credit under section 36(4). Rule 36(4) is silent, section 16 is silent, then authorities are silent. Till date, nobody knows whether 2A is a better solution or 2B is a better solution. And there is no proper enactment or rules or codification of law in line with this expectation of the government that we should restrict our credit. Although there are certain writ petitions which have been admitted by the courts of law, and let us see the fate of those judicial authorities, whether they strike off this 36(4) or whether the government goes ahead by winning those cases. Then, latest updates, issues and concerns, physical verification of premises. What will happen when the departmental officer will come in case there is no Aadhaar authentication? And if there is a physical verification of the premises, then personal identification would be carried. Mr. So-and-so, identify yourself. Then his ITRs would be verified for financial capacity. Then he has to give recommendations of 2 taxpayers. Olden time is coming back. In olden time, before getting a registration, we used to seek a surety, no previous cancellation, and then conditional RC. Even in those cases where the officer is suspicious or doubtful, once again the same words are coming up. ITC of buyers would be given only after having been filed GSTR 3B by the sellers paying at least 2% tax. Means the officer can put a condition on the RC that if this person is paying 2% tax in cash, only then the buyers of this particular taxpayer would be eligible for seeking credit. How possibly a buyer will come to know that this person into that particular category? A lot of hue and cry will be there once such provisions will come. Then I'm likely to, Chinaji, I'm likely to complete my discussion because my time is already over. So Aadhaar authentication, let me clarify certain issues here, that only one director, one partner, and one primary authorized signatory is enough as on today, whose this Aadhaar authentication would be mandatory. Means thereby, in case of a proprietorship firm, if the proprietor himself is one of the primary authorized signatory, then his Aadhaar authentication is required. In case of a partnership firm, if there is only one partner who is a primary authorized signatory also, then only one Aadhaar authentication is required. But in case of a company, suppose there is one director, one whole-time director, one managing director, one chairman, one part-time director, etc., then one director and one primary authorized signatory, only 2 Aadhaar authentications are needed. Means thereby, if primary authorized signatory is different, then the director, partner, etc., then only 2 Aadhaar authentications are needed. Earlier, there was a large list of exclusions from Aadhaar authentication, but now it is limited to government department, PSU, local authority, statutory body. And there are detailed FAQs available on CBIC website on this Aadhaar authentication. They are comprising about more than 20 questions. So one should go through them to make more better clarity. Now, KYC, which is another option. Upload KYC documents of partners, promoter, and primary authorized signatory. Which all documents can be uploaded for eKYC and in which format? In fact, the portal will demonstrate both pop-up, whether you want to go for eKYC, whether you want to go for Aadhaar authentication. You can go for both, you can go for one. The taxpayer can select any of the following documents for eKYC. He can select Aadhaar enrollment number, passport, voter ID card, KYC form, and upload a certificate issued by the competent authority. Others, the document type should be in PDF. The maximum size of the upload should be 2 MB, and there are detailed FAQs available in this respect. It is last slide, which is having an important question. After the tax official has approved the eKYC document, will the authentication process be considered as completed, or Aadhaar authentication too needs to be done? If the tax official approves the KYC document, then taxpayer will be considered as eKYC authenticated and not Aadhaar authenticated. Means there are two methods of authentication. So if a person is going for eKYC, then Aadhaar is not mandatory, but he would be considered as KYC authenticated. In fact, the government want that there should be Aadhaar authentication. So they will still assume that why the person is not giving Aadhaar. The pop-up will not be displayed to taxpayer after eKYC authentication is done. Although if taxpayer himself wishes to authenticate Aadhaar, then can do so by navigating to My Profile, Aadhaar authentication status, send Aadhaar authentication link. Taxpayer won't be able to upload documents again if once approved by the tax official. However, taxpayer can view the document uploaded in the upload eKYC document column on Aadhaar authentication status page, etc. So there is a detailed procedure written about these two concepts of Aadhaar authentication and KYC, etc. in the FAQ. You just go through them briefly. You will understand even the procedure, etc., and everything about the new registrants and the existing registrants, etc. So with this, I extend my thanks to the chairman, sir, and the chairman in Indirect Tax Committee, Mr. China. Thank you very much, sir.
Viren sir, so members have raised the valuable questions, around 8 to 9 questions. Can you spend the 5 minutes so that the member get the clarity?
Certainly, certainly.
Yes, I read the question, sir. I read the questions. Please answer, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
and the first question, Shetal B, the sale of land form part of the aggregate turnover.
The sale of land is not forming part of the aggregate turnover. This sale of land only comes in picture when we talk about section 17, subsection 2 and 3 for the purposes of reversal of ITC. So as far as for registration purposes, it is not forming part of the aggregate turnover.
Yes, sir. The another question, sir. Krishna Sannidhi, a residential cooperative society with a membership fee less than 7,500, I hope it's rupees, and the total collection more than 90 lakhs per annum, is the registration required?
Not at all, because any amount which is being received less than 7,500 from each member is exempt under notification number 12/2017.
Okay, okay, clear, sir. The another question is Indukala Ishwanath, a recovery agent of financial institution, does he require registration?
I just add one thing here in this of Krishna Sanidhi question once again.
Yes, sir.
That in most of the cases which I am serving in my office, as far as RW etc. are concerned, although they are getting less than 7,500 from each member, but they are having huge income on account of interest on FDRs. So once interest on FDR is also exempt, and this 7,500 is also exempt, they think that they are outside the purview of GST registration. But at many occasions, I have found that they have let out certain premises to either ATM or a shopkeeper or some other shop or for some other reasons. So that precaution need to be taken care of. Now I'm coming to next question. A recovery agent of financial institution, does he require registration?
Yes, sir.
You see, the recovery agent of a FI or a bank or NBFC, etc., they come under the purview of RCM. And I already discussed that any person whose income is subject to RCM, he does not require any registration.
The another question is Lalita Sri. From which month 86B is applicable? Is it for the returns to be filed in Jan 2021 or Feb 2021?
You see, 86B is applicable with effect from 1st January 21. So effectively, the return which you will file into the month of February 20, for the month of January, it is applicable.
Okay, okay. The other question, sir, from Sailesh Babat. When we click on the Aadhaar authentication, link system error, message appear on the screen and we log out from the portal.
This particular issue has been taken care of by FAQ I am talking about.
Okay.
And you will certainly find a solution. In fact, they have mentioned this particular error and they have told the solution as well.
Yes. The another question is Harish Kumar. What is an supplier files his GSTR1 after generation of GSTR2B, but before filing of GSTR3B, can we claim the same in GSTR3B?
Let me read it again.
Yes.
What is an supplier? What is a supplier? File a GSTR1 means when a supplier files a GSTR1 after generation of 2B, after generation of 2B, but before filing B, can we claim the same in GSTR3B? Certainly, I got the question now. You see, I mentioned this in my latest discussion that whenever you are filing your GSTR3B, the law has not made clear whether Rule 36(4) applies as per GSTR2A or as per GSTR2B. This dilemma is known to the government, and government is likely to come in clarification very soon, and probably they would be clarifying 2B. The government is reluctant to come into clarification because of the reason that many of the writ petitions are pending before several high courts. So they are waiting for the outcome of those cases, and once they will get through them, then they will decide what kind of clarification they should come out. Because the section 16 do not put any kind of embargo, and the rules cannot say overtake the sections. So therefore, these 36(4) etc. are not are proper codification of rules. So therefore, till any further clarification comes from the department, I am of the view that you may take 2A as the base until 19th of that month. So until 19th of the month, you would be having, or 20th of the month, you would be having maximum credits into your 2A, and better you follow 2A until any further clarification comes.
Yes, sir. The other question, sir, from Indukala Ishwanath. Sir, we are claiming ITC in the month of October while filing 3B, but the supplier is filing the details only in the January 2021. So the amount will be reflected in 2B of January. This is the fault of the supplier. Why they are penalizing the recipient of service?
This is a routine question.
Yes.
I will always recommend that you forget about the supplier. You go according to your mood and fight for if there is any litigation tomorrow. In most of the routine cases, the department is not coming forward to question your credits. But in most of those cases where deviations are quite large, in those cases only we are flashed with notices. So therefore, you should not frighten before any notice comes. And if the notice comes, you can make an explanation that this credit although pertains to October month, but it is reflecting before the notice has come.
Okay. The other question, sir. A coffee estate sells uncovered coffee. Say coffee sale is the 1 crore and green pepper sale is the 10 lakhs and the black pepper is the 1 lakh. Is the registration compulsory?
Let
I
me
think-
read again. Let me
Yes,
read again.
it's the value is the criteria, sir. Yes,
A
sir.
coffee estate sells uncured coffee. Uncured coffee. Okay, it's an agriculture produce.
Yes, yes,
Say coffee sale is 1 crore.
yes.
And green pepper
Pepper.
sale
10 lakhs.
is 10 lakhs. It is taxable. And black pepper is 1 lakh. Is registration compulsory? Yes. You see, agriculture produce is exempt from tax, but part of the aggregate turnover. So I gave you an example in the beginning that I have my office in Delhi as a chartered accountant, but I have a farming in other state in Haryana, and if I club them together, my turnover exceeds 20 lakhs. So whether I need registration in both the states? The answer was no. The registration is only required in Delhi where I do my practice, but in the other states, since my turnover is exempt from tax, I do not need a registration. But for the purposes of aggregate turnover, exempt produce is considered. But the dilemma here comes of section 23.
Yes, sir.
Section 23 talks about that an agriculturist who is an individual and HUF, they are exempt from tax to the extent for registration to the extent of their agriculture produce. So there are two school of thoughts that that particular sentence means that agriculture produce will not even be considered for the purpose of inclusion into the aggregate turnover. But I'm not with that school of thought. I am of the opinion that agriculture produce would be clubbed for the purpose of aggregate turnover.
Okay. The similar question, sir. The agricultural seeds are not subject to GST. Whether the commission agent dealing in agricultural seeds is required to register and pay the GST if the commission is more than 20 lakhs.
You see, I have to go through the precisely notification number 12, the particular entry where the agriculture activities and certain allied activities are exempt from tax. And I need to check up whether an agriculturist who is a commission agent, he is also outside the purview of tax. So the querist may go through notification number 12, agriculture activities like processing of agriculture produce, etc., loading and loading of agriculture produce, transportation of agriculture produce. All those segments are actually exempt. So I suspect that this should also be exempt.
Yes, the last one, sir. The last
Yes,
question.
Yes,
A dormant company with a no turnover at all has to pay advocate fee for a case pertaining to earlier periods. Now rupees 10 lakhs, whether needs registration to pay under RCM.
Once again, I'll read the question. A dormant company with no turnover at all has to pay advocate fee for cases pertaining to earlier periods.
The fee is the 10 lakhs, sir. He's asking that fee is the 10 lakhs rupees. That fee is the earlier.
Yeah, actually, my try is to make the person exempt. Now that's the problem. Making him taxable is a very simple thing.
Yes.
A dormant company with no turnover at all has to pay advocate fee for cases pertaining to earlier periods. Now, rupees 10 lakhs whether needs registration to pay under RCM. Shubham, hello. अपने आप को अनम्यूट करो.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Hello,
कैसे हो?
welcome, Shubham. Ketan sir,
Thank you,
welcome.
thank you.
Shubham,
Young and dynamic.
एक बार मेरे ओपिनियन के साथ इसमें मैच करो ये डोरमेंट कंपनी के केस में.
Sorry, sir. I didn't see the question, sir. Sorry. I missed the question.
मैं बताता हूँ क्या है क्वेश्चन.
हाँ.
There is a notification of exemption that in case a GTA is supplying services to a business, non-registered business, unregistered business, then those GTA services are exempt.
Absolutely correct.
Same, if an advocate is supplying services to an unregistered person to the extent of 20 lakhs,
Correct.
that is exempt. But I do not recall whether even a private limited company is excluded from that. So I am hopeful that this querist may note down my email ID from my PPT and send me this particular question. I'll certainly find a solution to this, that this dormant company may not require registration.
Sure, sir. We will send that, sir. Sure.
Yeah. So I extend thanks once again to you. I'm obliged. Now I'll take a leave. Thank you very much, sir.
Mastan sir, you're muted.
Yeah. Oh, right. Now, thank you, Chauhan sir. And it's really a wonderful session in the evening. You have taken the session so explained and several complicated issues in the GST registration process. Members, we will take the break another 3 minutes. We'll again reassemble by 6:56. The young and dynamic speaker is waiting for the other session is the composite schemes under GST. We'll meet 6:56.
Chinaji, I can say that
Yes, sir.
Shubham is one of the brightest speaker in our committee.
Yes, absolutely.
Brightest.
Yes, yes.
So that's very kind of you. It's only through you that I draw motivation. You've always
He
been
has
very kind. Thank you.
in-depth knowledge and a very good motivator to the all young chartered accountants.
Yes, it's a really, sir.
Sir, I draw motivation from you.
And this is coming from my heart.
Thank you so much, sir. You've always been very kind to me. Thank you so
Good.
much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, just I'm signing out, sir.
Yes, thank you so much. I really am so happy.